Hi, everybody. How are you? We're here for another installment into our anatomy and physiology series, and today we are going to talk about the reproductive system. This will be a two-part video, and our first part will be male reproduction. So let's go ahead and jump right into that. And here we go. Okay, so male reproduction. First, the functions of the reproductive system, whether it be male or female, is to produce egg for the female or sperm for the male cells, to transport and sustain those cells, again, egg female, sperm male, to produce and secrete certain hormones that are differing between the males and females, and for females to nurture the developing offspring. So those are your basic functions. Okay. As far as an introduction goes, and again, not specific to one or the other, couple of terms you're going to want to be familiar with. The first of those being gonad. A gonad really just refers to the sex organ for that particular sex, be it female or male. In the females, the gonads or the sex organ, primary sex organ, is the ovaries. Those produce egg cells. In males, it is the testes. Those produce sperm cells. And in both, they both are responsible for hormone production as well. There are also secondary reproductive organs, and in both male and female, those are all the other organs, ducts, and glands that transport and sustain gametes. And gametes, of course, are the egg in female and the sperm in male cells. All right, so we are going to go ahead and start with our male reproductive system. If you haven't already, and I could ask you please to hit that like and subscribe buttons. Subscribing to this channel really helps me out. It means a lot to me, and it allows me to continue to make these videos for you. So if you do that, that would be great. And let's get started. All right, so in the male reproductive system, we have the testes. The testes are the primary reproductive organ in the male. They start developing up in the abdominal cavity prior to birth. So even while the child is forming and developing in the womb. In the last 2 months before birth, or sometimes shortly after birth, the testes will descend into the scrotum. The scrotum is a pouch of skin and subcutaneous tissue that extends just below the abdomen and right behind the penis. It is divided into two parts by a vertical septum, allowing one testy in each side. And it is the location that is outside the body that aids in viable sperm production. Sperm cannot survive very well in warm temperatures. So the fact that the sperm, which we'll talk about here in a minute, is primarily produced and matured and housed in the testes, the mechanics of it and the location of them is outside of the body because it allows for it to be about 3 degrees Celsius below normal body temperature, aiding in the production and therefore the viability of the sperm because they're not sitting in 98.6 or higher body temperature temperatures and dying off. Here is a diagram of the a testy. We have here these little coiled up areas here. These are the seminiferous tubules. Oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to do that. Those are the seminiferous tubules. Up here just behind, on top and behind, I guess you could call it, is another bunch of coiled areas called the epididymis. And then this tube that is continuous with the epididymis is called the vas deferens, or sometimes called the ductus deferens. Okay, and we'll go over what all those things do here in a moment, but all together, this is the testy, seminiferous tubules inside, epididymis, posterior and superior portion, and then the vas deferens is what is continuous with that epididymis that leads out of the testy. All right, so we talked about sperm being the main product of this whole area. This is what a sperm looks like. It is divided into three parts. You have the head, the midpiece, and the tail. The head is covered by what's called an acrosome. And the acrosome, which is this area right here, the acrosome is basically like a little, I don't know, like a cap that has enzymes in it that helps for the sperm to penetrate into the female gamete, which is the egg. It's surrounded by a nuclear membrane, and this is also where the 23 pairs of chromosomes are housed. Well, 23 chromosomes are housed that will then meet up with the 23 chromosomes of the egg to make the 46 chromosomes that will, if fertilized, produce an embryo. Okay? All contained within the head. The midpiece is where the mitochondria is, because remember, this is a cell. Okay, so mitochondria, if you recall back from the cells, is what provides ATP, or adenosine triphosphate, which is what supplies energy for the cell, in this case, the sperm. And then the tail is the locomotor region. It consists of what is called the flagellum, and this is what allows it to propel itself around to get where it needs to be. Okay, so the process by which the sperm cells develop is called spermatogenesis. This development occurs in the seminiferous tubules, which, as you recall from just a minute ago, is the coiled up tubes in the inside of the testy. It is that area is packed with cells that are in various stages of development, and what are called Sertoli cells, which are the cells that help to provide support and nourishment for the various stages of developing cells. As they start to develop, these are released into the seminiferous tubules that then leave the testes. From there, it enters the epididymis, and it's in the epididymis where the sperm cells finish maturing. The epididymis is a tightly coiled tube that's connected to the testis by an efferent duct. Now, if you remember efferent, if you've watched some of my other videos that have to do with this sort of thing, efferent, E for exit. So an efferent duct is something that takes something away from somewhere. The sperm completely matures in the epididymis and becomes fertile, so it becomes viable and able to fertilize an egg. And this is also where mature sperm are stored until they are needed. Okay. The ductus deferens, or the vas deferens, as they are oftentimes called, is a tube that's continuous with the epididymis. And this is where sperm moves through to get to the ejaculatory duct. So when time comes, it allows for this tube, allows for the sperm to exit its storage area and get into the ejaculatory duct, which is formed by the convergence of the ductus deferens and empties the sperm and fluids from the seminal vesicles into the urethra so they can escape the body. If you notice this word vas, in our medical terminology, if you recall what ectomy means, ectomy is a surgical removal or surgery. If you put vasectomy together, this is the area in which they do the surgery. They actually cut when they perform a vasectomy, so that a male cannot impregnate a female. Now, if you want to, we'll go back to that. And this makes sense, right? Because if the sperm cells are being created in here, finish maturing here, and then are carried by way of the vas deferens to where they need to go to exit the body, if you cut this area, they can't go anywhere, and therefore renders a man sterile. All right. Okay. So once the sperm leaves the area, it will enter into the urethra. Now, if you have already watched the urinary video, you know that the urethra actually does double duty. Urethra is part of the urinary system. It is also part of the male reproductive system. The urethra is, just as a refresher, the tube, so to speak, that extends from the urinary bladder to the external urethral orifice, which is in the end of the penis. For reproductive purposes, it carries sperm and fluids from the reproductive system. For urinary purposes, it carries urine from the urinary system, or from the bladder in this case. There are three regions of the urethra. There's the prostatic urethra, which is the portion that passes through the prostate gland, which we'll talk about here in a minute when we talk about accessory glands. The membranous urethra, which is just a short region that passes through the pelvic floor. And then the spongy urethra, also called the penile urethra, which is the part of the urethra that extends the length of the penis. Okay, here is a diagram. So here's the testes, epididymis. Here's the scrotum that encases all of it. Here is your vas or ductus deferens that comes up here. Now we are going to talk about the accessory glands, which include the seminal gland and the bulbourethral gland here. But notice that this ductus deferens comes up here and meets up with the seminal gland and then passes right through the prostate. This is the prostate here. Okay, passes right through there, but then meets, and that's what becomes the ejaculatory duct. And then it meets up with the urethra, as does the bulbourethral gland. And it all becomes one common tube, so to speak, until it reaches the outside world. Okay. So keep these in mind here as we go forward to talk about accessory glands. So the seminal vesicles is that's what looked like, kind of like a little bunch of grapes there, is a sac-like bunch of glands that join the ductus deferens and the ejaculatory duct. In the seminal vesicles, there's a fluid that's secreted that contains fructose, and fructose is a sugar, and it is there primarily to provide energy for the sperm on their travels, okay? The prostate is a firm, dense structure located right behind the urinary bladder. It encircles the urethra. It also secretes a fluid Its fluid, though, is a thin, kind of milky fluid that is alkaline or basic that helps sperm not only to move, but in addition to the alkaline secretions from the Cowper's gland or the bulbourethral gland, helps to neutralize the acidity in the vagina because that is ideally where all of this is going. Okay. The bulbourethral gland, or what some might call the Cowper's gland, is a pea-sized gland, and that was that second little one. Let's go back real quick. That's this guy right here. Okay. That secretes an alkaline fluid too in response to sexual stimulation. It not only helps to neutralize the acidity of the vagina, it helps to neutralize any residual urine that might be in the urethra, because you can't always get it all out, and provides for lubrication during sexual intercourse. All this works out beautifully because it all helps the sperm hopefully get to where it needs to go unharmed. Okay. So seminal fluid, which is what the fluids that come from the seminal vesicles, that come from the prostate, that come from the Cowper's glands, all mixed together is an alkaline mixture of the sperm and then all the secretions from those accessory glands. Okay. In a single ejaculation, so in a single ejaculation of semen, which is what sperm and these fluids are called, you can expect either 1.5 to 6 milliliters of ejaculate. And in each of those milliliters, in a normal, healthy individual, there will contain 50 to 150 million, yes, I said million sperm per ml. Okay. If a individual has a count below 10 to 20 million, that's considered low, and that could cause fertility issues. Because here's the deal. I know that seems like an astronomical amount of sperm, and it is when it only takes one to actually fertilize an egg. But here is where the problem lies. You have to basically, just to cut the odds, have that many sperm be sent off to hopefully have that one make it to the egg. So when you think about pregnancy occurring, fertilization actually happening, on the one hand, it seems like it shouldn't be that big of a deal and should happen quite easily. And for some, it does. However, for those who do not get pregnant easily or try and can't, it seems like almost an impossibility given statistically how many sperm are sent out to try and accomplish this one goal. Okay. So it really is an amazing, amazing thing, and amazing that we're even here, quite honestly. So the penis is the male copulatory organ. Its job is to transfer sperm to the vagina in the reproductive sense. Its other job is to carry urine out for urinary. It consists of 3 columns of what we call erectile tissue that is wrapped in connective tissue and covered with skin. The 2 dorsal columns, so the ones in the back, are called corpora cavernosa. And then the front column in the middle is called the corpus sponginosum. The parts of the penis are as follows: the root that attaches the penis to the body. The body, or the shaft of the penis, is the visual portion that we see. And then the glans penis is the distal end that is formed by the corpus sponginosum. At that distal end, there is the urethral orifice, which is the opening where the urethra comes out, and the prepuce, or is also known the foreskin, that covers the glans penis. Now, this is only present in uncircumcised males because once circumcised, the prepuce or the majority of the prepuce is cut away, so it no longer covers the glans penis. As far as sexual response goes, if there's no sexual arousal happening, so guys just hanging out, not doing anything, there's only small amounts of blood in the erectile tissue, so the penis appears flaccid. When sexual excitement occurs, the arterioles, or these small arteries that let blood flow into that area, dilate to allow more blood to flow into the erectile tissue, which engorges the tissue. And then the penis enlarges and becomes rigid or achieves what we know to be an erection. With continued stimulation, a level is reached, and the stimulation continues to where contraction of all of those areas results in what is called emission. What immediately follows emission is ejaculation, and ejaculation is the forceful expulsion of semen from the urethra. So basically, the difference between emission and ejaculation is emission is a forceful expulsion, but not out of the body. It's when everything is forced into the urethra. And that's why ejaculation immediately follows, because then ejaculation is the forcing of the semen out of the urethra. When this occurs, there is a sphincter in the urinary bladder that closes to prevent semen from entering into the bladder or urine from entering into the urethra. As far as hormone control goes in males, everything pretty much starts at puberty. So at puberty, reproductive organs start to become sexually mature. For most boys, this happens around 10 to 12 years of age and then continues until about 16 to 18. Again, this is a generalization. Some it happens earlier, some later. Some continues for longer, some does not. Depends on the individual. What happens at this point is a hormone called GnRH, or gonadotropin releasing hormone, gets secreted by the hypothalamus in the brain. And that then stimulates the pituitary gland, which is also in the brain, to secrete two hormones, one called luteinizing hormone, or LH, and the other called follicle stimulating hormone, or FSH. I will follow up with an endocrine video for these, which explains all of these hormones. LH promotes the growth of cells in the testes that secrete testosterone. And then FSH stimulates spermatogenesis in the seminiferous tubules. Testosterone is another hormone, the main male hormone, that promotes maturation of male reproductive organs. It stimulates spermatogenesis, and it promotes the development of what we call secondary sex characteristics. And what are secondary sex characteristics? Underarm hair, chest hair, facial hair, so hair everywhere, it seems. And the deepening of the voice in a male, because testosterone has an effect on the larynx, or the vocal cords. It causes them to thicken in a male, and that is what causes a young man's voice to deepen. Of course, we always laugh as that is, occurring, because they do the with their voices. But that's a secondary sex characteristic. More muscle mass is a secondary sex characteristic. Each sex has secondary sex characteristics, but these are the main male ones. As the male reproductive system ages, there's usually kind of a gradual, subtle decline. Sperm and testosterone production starts to decrease around the age of 50 for most men. Now, unlike women, it never stops. Like males can produce sperm till they die, whereas women are not fertile for their entire lives. But there is a decrease in a lot of these. Sperm production, testosterone production. You'll hear a lot of older men that say they have low T, right? Low testosterone. Um, the decrease in semen occurs because they're not producing as much of those fluids either. The prostate will enlarge for most males as they get older. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It doesn't mean, cancer or anything necessarily, but it can cause issues because of where it's positioned and the fact that it surrounds the urethra can cause urinary problems. Um, Blood vessels and erectile tissue become less elastic, so it's harder to achieve and or maintain an erection as a man ages. So these are just all kind of things that go with aging. There's nothing, you know, that a man does to cause this to happen. It's just part of getting older. As far as pathology goes, for the reproductive system, there's far more illness and disease for women than there are for men, but there's still some pretty bad things for men too. So, BPH, which is benign prostatic hypertrophy, um, again, it's benign, so it's not a cancerous issue, but it's definitely when the prostate starts to enlarge. There are the cancers, of course, testicular and prostate cancers in men, erectile dysfunction, always for both men and women, certain STIs, genital herpes, gonorrhea, syphilis. And then there's another pathology. This is usually congenital or they're born with it, hypospadias, which is when the urethral orifice is not at the end of the penis like it should be. It's on the back side of it or the dorsal side of the penis, of the glans penis. Um, Not insanely common, but not completely uncommon either. So, those are just a few of the things. And for males, because males do not have a specified um, provider for their reproductive health like women do, if a male is having reproductive system because the two are joined so closely, they will generally see a urologist for those issues. And most urologists do provide at least some level of reproductive health, um, care for men. Um, if they're having fertility issues, of course, they would go to a fertility specialist. But as far as the pieces and the parts go, they can see a urologist usually for their issues. All right, so that is all I have for the male reproductive system. Thank you so much for watching, and we will definitely see you next time. Please, please, please do come back for the female reproductive system. Little more in depth, but definitely will have a lot of information for you. And until then, have a great day.